stuff here, but I will try as much as possible to be clear in my explanation. We have a lot of slides. There's an article that I kind of used to build this lecture, and I will try and upload it. Once I get clearance, there's no ethical issue regarding sharing scientific information using it for academic purpose. So the basic agenda today is to look at the learning outcome, because the essence of having a lecture is to be able to touch on the learning outcome, which basically is 4 and 5, and then look at how this lecture can help you with your summative assessment. So I took a very good look at your learning outcome, and I found so many aspects there that involves critical evaluation, critically discuss. I said, if I'm going to deliver anything today, I need to touch based on it, and thanks goodness, Kim is also coming to do that. But I'm possibly going to contextualize it within this topic, so that you can have a very pragmatic view, knowledge about to do this. Because when you are writing, what do we need to see in your write-up or your essay that will make us to know that, okay, you demonstrated knowledge of critical evaluation, critical thinking. That means I'm going to talk about, critical evaluation within public health and within partnerships. So it's very interesting. You need it, and everything is tied up. When you're going through everything, your personal reading, you'll be saying, you'll be drawing the circle, everything will come full cycle. Trust me. Then definitely that will take us to concept theory. What do you mean by construct, model, framework, paradigms, and all those stuff. Then we'll look at the history of partnership working, because history really matter. Many political rhetorics, we find them in science, in public health, but we need to know where it's coming from, so that we'll have a very well-grounded knowledge when we start conceptualizing certain ideology, whether it's historical or political. Some things we're doing, we are applying in daily life, at work, possibly emanated from politics. So we need to be careful of that. Then we look at the definition and how we can meet the learning outcome. Then we look at theory of partnership from scientific literatures, and we try to see how we can address summative assessment. And we round up with advantages and disadvantages of partnership working. It's a long slide. We have 56, but there are some that Dr. Abubakar has already uploaded there. So what I did was I took some and I added mine, from my own way of thinking that would be an extension of his lecture. So I will upload this later, but at the same time, try and read out of Dr. Abubakar's slide as well. You will see few similarities in this and in his own. So the LO4, first one, it says synthesize knowledge from a range of sources to discuss partnership working. So for you to be able to discuss partnership working, you are going to arrange with me. You need the context, you need the knowledge, the definition, the theory, the concept, the framework. And for you to be able to synthesize anything, you need to have the knowledge of what is called partnership. How did it start, or partnership working, and then when you synthesize, you should be able to make assertion. This is where you apply yourself. You should be able to say, from where I stand now, from all I've read, this is my view. That is assertion, and your assertions have to be logical. Then the fifth one that is related to partnership working is critically discuss and evaluate the public health theory to social action. explaining the relevance of public health practice. So how are these connected to your summative assessment? So to me, I mean, maybe to other people, the key words to me here is synthesize, critically discuss, theory, and social action. Yeah, if you see any typo in this slide, is because maybe I didn't have enough time, but I did. It took me 3 days to go over these things. So, and yet there will still be some typo. Okay, so what I meant to write there was social action. So what do we need to be critical in our discussion when we consider public health? What knowledge or what tools do we need to be able to critically discuss partnership working, social action, theory, concept in public health? And how do we apply those tools? They're very important, so that when you are saying I'm critically looking at something, what are the terms we will see that will say, yeah, you actually carry out a critical discussion, because some people, they will do descriptive discussion and it's not critical. So, for example, when I'm going through some essays, there are terms I need to see that will make me or any scientist to know that, yes, you've carried out critical evaluation of these things. All right, so what are those tools? We need knowledge of, because critical evaluation is a scientific and ethical process. And I'm sure a lot of you will agree with me at the end of this lecture. It's a scientific and ethical process. Initially, I wanted to leave it as scientific, but if something is unethical, no matter how scientific it is, it will not be accepted. So knowledge of scientific paradigms, we need it. We need the philosophical principles, approaches, and perspective. We need to be able to have those tools in our hand. We need knowledge of theories, model, framework. We I could term to be TMF, theory, model, frameworks. And there are some nuances between these three terms, so which I'm going to clarify as we go on. So we need knowledge of ethical principles, no doubt, like I emphasized, no matter how scientific, knowledge-based, informative, relevant something is, if it's not ethical, that is morally grounded, it will not be accepted. So let's start with knowledge of scientific paradigms. I brought this up because some of you may be thinking, why? Well, these are the pillars of our endeavors as public health professionals. And you have to be able to notice that most of us, is debatable, but I will expect most of us as public health to be at the middle. Positivist look at things. They offer us so many good approaches that will enable us to achieve the truth or credibility. An interpretivist, or another name for it is post-positivist, is to say, okay, there are things we may not be able to count or measure, or that are objective, but it matters to us because our lives are socially constructed in many ways, and we may not be able to find any objective measures to certain things. So most public health professionals are within, and emphatically social action approaches between these. So they take a lot from positive view. Friday Oyima, yeah, you want to say something? Go on. I think Shadra will make you, yeah, to be able to talk. Or if you have,
I think if our numbers go beyond a particular number, it's not possible for the person to speak. I'll investigate how I can make you speak, but in the meantime, if you can put your question, I mean, I can.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Please, Amy, to tell me whenever any guys able to put their questions there. Thank you, Shadra. So, like I was saying, we find ourselves in between these two parts.
They cannot share audio unless I make the person a moderator, but I'm not keen on that.
Okay.
Since our numbers go beyond that, they have to use the chat function.
All right. So we find ourselves in between these. paradigms. Paradigms are just, beliefs, strong beliefs that set out certain philosophies. So positivist. So the idea is that we public health found ourselves in this. We take some things from the positivist paradigm, interpretivist or post-positivist paradigm, and we'll be able to combine it. That okay, we will satisfy both paradigms and to be able to achieve credibility. And if you look at the philosophy of the critical realism, which social action is embedded in, and which we're going to be everybody will be finding themselves to be able to achieve, because public health professionals want to be credible in their endeavors. So that's why you're learning statistics, and epidemiology, quantifiable approaches to issue of public health. So the belief is that we, using social action, what we call reality, whether objective or subjective, can be changed, and we cannot separate it from politics. We cannot separate it from culture. We cannot separate them from religion. And the aims of all, yeah?
Sorry for interjecting. Please check your message, your private message.
Oh, okay. What do you go about that? Elizabeth, can you put your Shadrach? I don't see any private message here.
All right, I'll send another private message.
Okay. So the idea is that we do find ourselves in this way, and we need to be able to combat this. So both objectivism, how do we make things to be objective? So social actions, basically, we deal with power imbalance. These are the things you're going to be focusing on: inequality, social change, social justice, social marginalization, exclusion, cohesion. And we need a very critical tools to be able to do that. Yeah. So we should be able to achieve this, and have very, very specific tools to be able to do that. It is very, very essential for the purpose of achieving credibility. So from there, we'll be able to okay, I need to put on my video. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Shadra. So can you all see me now?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. So the principles are all tied up to ontological position, which is realism, because social action has taken from both end of paradigms. And what I mean by ontological position, what questions, what aspect are you trying to explore, or are you trying to evaluate? You need to be able to, the questions we ask, are they realistic? Are they measurable? Okay, if they are not, if it is not possible to be able to do that, can we have proxy? So for example, somebody wants to measure social cohesion. Social cohesion or exclusions are very important to us. And how can we mitigate that? We can use proxy or proximal approach to that. So how many number of people attend a gathering you set up? It could be a proxy approach to measuring social cohesion. So you set up a community and you want to address social exclusion. How many people in the community attended, the number? So that's an answer to positivists that, yeah, social cohesion could be subjective, but we have objective way of measuring it. So your ontological questions and measurement and talk should be able to do it. So when you are reading and you are writing and you see that they are not really taking a position of ontological aspect of it, then you are coming across that write-up or that intervention from ontological position, and to be able to critique it and be able to offer suggestion that, hey, we need to approach it ontologically, either qualitatively or quantitatively, or be able to find somewhere we can make it to be objective. This is related to realism. So our experience, knowledge may not be realistic, may not be of realist, but it could be, could be subjective, but we can modify it. So that is the epistemology. How do we get the knowledge? The pathway to it. Is it logical? How many biases and errors can we prevent before getting to this truth? In science, we don't say truth, we say credibility. And the methodology and method are there to be able to critically look at it, that, okay, what are these people doing? When we start talking about partnership in working, working in partnership working, what are they doing? How do they do it? How do they arrive it to be able to say, okay, I'm going to use this model, or I'm going to use this framework. So it's not just enough for you to say, I'm going to use so model. You need to be able to, as a master degree or postgraduate student, to be able to critically tell us the reason when you look at those methodology and method they use, and say, yeah, I think I will use this approach in tackling or mitigating or eradicating or this health issue in my essay. So the aim is to be logic, with this synthesis of truth or credibility, and arrive at credible assertions. So we're going to look at those tools quickly, so that to be able to achieve as much as possible. And touch a little bit on each of them, because they're not isolated, they're all interwoven. So objectivism is what the positivist is trying to present to us, and that's what social action find themselves dealing with some subjective meanings and adding it, bring a positivist view that, okay, we can make this to be objective. For example, your introduction, it has to be structural. You give the rationale and you go down, streamlining to aims and objectives. And when you write aims could be very subjective. That's fine, but your objectives have to be objectives. So, and that's why these acronyms, SMART, specific, measurable, has to be applied when you are writing your objectives. Because most time when we're reading essay and you write your objective, if it is not smartly written, that is, if it is not specific, it is not measurable, it's time conscious. I'm sure most of you will know the meaning of SMART. And if you don't know, go and Google it. Those are the acronyms to make objectives to be objectives. And this is what positivist is saying. We're measuring social cohesion, or we want to mitigate social marginalization, and we write objectives, and they are not measurable. How are we going to evaluate them? Now, we are in the middle, the critical realist. It's okay, no problem, we got answer for you. We will make our objective to be smartly written, and it will reflect in our evaluation. So note this, when you write objectives, it does not resonate with your evaluation. So you say, I'm going to measure social cohesion. How will you evaluate whether you have been able to achieve or mitigate social exclusion? So it has to, you have to, so it's either you use quantitative method or qualitative method, but it must reflect in your evaluation. So please know that. And that is logical flow in your writing. And that is scientific, The other one is the validity and reliability. Very, very essential. Many of them out there, which makes sense. Validity and reliability majorly is to, achieve the credibility. So the number of biases, inherent biases in your work, in your articles you are reading are varied. So I will explore, I will encourage you guys to read and list validity and reliability, different types, understand them, and see how you can apply them when you are reading and when you are writing. For example, construct validity. I've emphasized it many times. Social exclusion. How do you measure it? So if you state it very well, in a very objective way, and you carry it out and you reflect in your evaluation, yes. So you've stated what you say you're going to do in your objectives and you carry it out. That is construct validity. So you are talking about health inequality and you want to address health inequality, and you break it down to poverty. And what is poverty? And you measure poverty as a proxy to, do you have car? Do you have this? Do you have that? You know, and you link it with morbidity and mortality. That means you are carrying out what you say you're going to do, because health inequality is big, but breaking it down and carrying it out with logical flow reveal construct validity. And this is more or less reflecting in your how you grant your research questions, hypotheses, and especially objective using construct. For example, in many ways, if I want to achieve construct validity, I use the construct of that theory to design my question, to design my hypothesis, possibly, and to design my objective. So once you do that, so for example, a belief model contains 4 constructs or 5 constructs or 6 constructs, and you use those constructs to design your research question, to design your objectives. Then you are carrying out a construct. You have your study or your essay or your write-up or your submissions, whatever you call it, as construct validity. Cultural validity, this is ethics, moral. You know, in many ways, you look at the entirety of everything and you look at it and say, okay, it has cultural validity, especially the consent form in your research and some other things you may need to do. The collation, as you see in partnership, does it have cultural validity? You know, does it have moral values, which I'm going to be asking you? So all these things are there to prevent biases and error. So let's look at the TMF, the theory, model, and framework. Some of you may struggle with it. It's nothing, but we use this word interchangeably every day: theory, concept, principles, approaches. You know, for example, you need to differentiate between approaches and perspective. What is the difference between theory, model, and framework? You know, they are not really, but you know, there are nuances between them. So the basic thing is that theory, the utility of theory is that it explains and it has the ability to be able to predict. And it also has, you know, it's going to be very parsimonious, as in, you know, tight, conservative, you know, state something wisely. So any divination, any rational statement can be a theory as long as it's, you know, it presents variables, construct, possibly measurable. It's not all, but, you know, some of you may be saying, oh, theories are something that it could be empirically, it could be empirical theory or hypothetical theory. You know, you look at certain phenomena and you're able to bring some words together that is logical. So what about model? You know, model basically is the structural view that you can present, and I would like you to be able to present that in your essay, you know, maybe as an appendix, you know, to be able to show how you support your ideas, your concepts. You know, ideas, concepts are more or less, without being semantic, they are more or less the same, you know, something in your brain, and you bring word because you can develop theory or theorize from looking at something or from thinking, from your idea, from your understanding, but model will bring it out, and model will show the path of how you link everything together. So you may need to do that and present it as an appendix to be able to show. So what about framework? There are different types anyway. Mathematical models, analytical model, conceptual models. It's more or less, I'm thinking about this, and this is what I'm thinking. You know, take for instance, if you want to travel to London, you may have a conceptual model on how you want to travel from here to London. I'm going to go to this one first, from that one. So when you now build that model, you show it. So also in analytical model, which we're going to be doing in your statistics, how we build model to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. So it gives better understanding of idea, of concept. You need to be able to identify the right model. If there's any existing model out there, or the one you build, you know, based on your understanding, and your model has to be logical, and then you have to apply the relevant one, whether the one you are thinking, whether the one that's out there, or whether the one you are able to meet up and critique and say, okay, I'm not going to use this because it doesn't like this, but I'm going to insert this into it. So let's look at framework. Model and frameworks are basically similar, but the things about framework is more detailed than model, and it can contain more than 2-3 theories, with many constructs as well. It's more detailed. It offers so many things, and you can use it to build, to plan, and also to anticipate challenges. So identify performance measures and measure the impact of partnership working. So this is the definition Walker and Vance in 2019 offered towards models and framework. Okay, all right. So the theory model framework, there are many health promotion planning models for public health. There are many theories, there are many models, there are many frameworks out there. So, but we look at the social action one, because we are talking about it. So social action, basically any theoretical approach, conceptual framework, philosophical principle that focuses on interaction of people. People have to be at the center. They built on beliefs that people are free, will, and choice to determine their own action. So what does partnership working has to do with this? By now, I think you should be having an idea, because I've already told you what social action theory, anything whatsoever, any theory, any model, any framework that kind of focuses on people and how to reduce social imbalances and how to mitigate social exclusion or reduce inequality in our society. That is the framework of social action. So what I mean by PW is that partnership in working, or working partnership, any way you want to put it. Is it a social concept now? Is it a model? Is it a paradigm? Is it a theory? But before you answer, before you conclude, before you reach conclusion, let's look at the historical perspective of these terms, because context, history really matter when you are building your theory, if you really want it to be very, very sensitive and have some specificity. So it came from this political slogan, what works is what matters. And it stemmed from...
Can you pause? I mean, Olushola is saying that um, they don't understand what you're talking about.
Okay.
So
So
don't worry about the summative. I'll do a 30-minute section after a day's presentation.
Blessing, yeah, thank you. Can the lecturer just pause? We do not, you say we, you are the only one. I don't understand what he's teaching. And also his expectation for the summative is so ambiguous. Olushola, you generalize there by saying we, but I understand you are saying. So Olushola, what I'm trying to say is that how do you critique? What tools do you need to be able to carry out your assignment? It stems from your knowledge about certain things, the number of biases you can prevent, the number of errors you can look at, the number of validity you can say, okay, assertion that this is the way things should be. These are expected from you. And if this lecture is not really helping you much to do that, possibly when you go through the video again and the lecture slides, it will make more meanings to you. So what I'm saying is about partnership is that it came from political agenda, the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. So when people want to establish governance of welfare, the political leaders, policy, they set up a motion, they have an idea. The idea, more or less like a concept, and it's acceptable, it has moral value. It's something that is so nice for us to do. Let's work together. Let's be able to do things together, not to waste resources. But how do we implement these? how do we implement this? So there's some of you have to learn how to talk to people. I don't know what you mean by academic jargons. If you really want to, yeah, academic terms. Thank you, Babatunde. That's better way of saying it. The in science, in public health, you need certain jargons and you need certain terms, and these are the things I'm trying to uh, present to you so that you'll be able to use it. So that because when you are critically evaluating something and you don't use certain terms, you may not be able to get the expected result. So yeah, I'm going to do that, Mutia, towards the end, but this is a build up to it. Okay, thank you, Mutia. Does that make sense? So if you follow it, you'll be able to see what I'm trying to achieve here. So towards the end, it's possibly going to make sense. Okay, so now, how do we conceptualize this? Is it of governance? It started politically, and definitely it's a social policy to improve the welfare so that people, organizations, everybody will be able to work together and achieve all these things. That is the main thing. That is where it stems from. And so we look at some definition by social science to be able to properly define and possibly evaluate or operationalize these terms. All right, so definition of partnership. I will give you 1 minute to read it. Then can you now apply all I've been saying about objectivism? Is it reliable? Is it valid? Is it subjective? Is it objective? You know, these are the things you are going to be taking as the ontological question you're going to be asking, the existence, the being, the truth. What are we doing here? So take a minute and look at this before we start critiquing it. All right. You will see sometimes there that may be very, very hard to operationalize. How can we have common terms? How can we have common objective? How can we be interdependence? Autonomy, what does that mean? Accountability, how do we do that? How do we assert that in partnership working? These are the things positivists will look at and critique the definition of partnership working. And that's what I'm trying to say. So when I say objectivism, objective, or writing your smart, or looking at definition or theory, they're all tying up into this. Because if you cannot measure interdependence, if you cannot measure accountability, how can you evaluate it? How can you assert that this thing is accountable? How can you be able to confidently say, yay, this is very accountable? So those are the criteria you'll be looking at. The first one of partnership, look at the terminology and say it's not parsimonious. Parsimonious means it is not tight, it's not conservative, it's possibly loose and fluid. You know, this is possibly these two scientists, you will know that they are more or less positivist, who is looking at things from measurable point of view and ended up saying it leads to conclusion. Terminology is used interchangeably when they often have slightly different meanings, leading to confusion. Semantic, all this principle, all this philosophy try to bring out the best in everything. So The second one is partnership is a very variable concept that is often not well understood, and that while it seems to work reasonably well under certain conditions, there are many situations in which it should probably not be the government's first choice of organization form. So here again, the context, how can you replicate partnership working? If it works in certain borough, in a city, can it work in another place? So if you have a model, how can you use a model in certain boroughs so that everything will work perfectly? So this is basically context. So how do you contextualize? So there's no perfect theory, there's no perfect definition. Rather, something you may be able to, as public health professional, be able to contextualize to make it to work. So, for example, these two guys argue that there cannot be blueprint. Blueprint means there cannot be perfect theory, perfect concept, perfect framework for successful partnership. Rather, each partnership needs to find a balance between the flexibility that partnership require if they are to break new ground. Finding that balance requires skills that are not always available. So you could see partnership working is good, just like certain many subjective factors we need in our life, for it to work, for we to be able to implement certain public health intervention, we need partners, whether public to public or private to public, which we're going to go through later on. We need that to be able to, but how do we make it work? How do we implement these? And these are the critiques emanating from literature. So this guy also mentioned that there are so many terminologies associated with partnership, and Dr. Abubakar was able to pull this up, and when we're looking at all this, it's trying to say, construct validity, what do you mean by coalition, collaboration? You will go across some terms. You may not see partnership working, but you may see cooperation, coordination, coalition, alliance. They're all referring to the same thing. That makes the definition not to be tight, not to be parsimonious, not to be conservative, and not to have construct validity. So these are the things, and it goes on and on and on. Different types: interprofessional working, interorganizational working, we even doing interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary in the university. You have people being invited from different departments, but if it's not done with mutual respect, with so many values, it may not be able to work. So this is partnership working with so many terminology. So now, what is partnership working in relation to social action, social determinant of health, and community empowerment? Now, let's look at it again. Is this a social concept grounded in governance, mandated as social policy for public health professionals to prevent, mitigate, manage complex health issues? Is this correct? When I look at it in totality, that is the meaning to me. It's a mandatory thing by the government. It is expected for people to work together from different walks of life and be able to bring out solutions. And that is what critical realism is saying. People need to be able to do things, take action, affecting their life, and be able to, how do we bring all those resources together? So let's look at existing literature, how it started. I will encourage you to get this article. I'm going to, when I get the clearance, I will upload it, because the two theories and concepts of partnership working is what stated there. So if you read it, and you may maybe want to understand the terms or the jargons, as one of you call it, that there are good jargons that we need, especially if we're going to be communicating with each other. The jargons may not be clear to people outside our domain of pursuit, but these are the lingua franca that public health professionals may need to use to talk to each other. So there's little theoretical literature on partnership. Social sciences literature identify three: true social coordination or governance. Like I said, most of them requires hierarchy, market, and networks. Those are the major three things these literatures actually address. And basically, you look at many of these associations, whether public to public or public private uh, or, or any other forms, that it has hierarchy power. And if you look at markets, that maybe some incentives involve multiple organizations competitively trading goods and services on price. And the network is actually the social action aspect, which is horizontal, which involves some values that you may need to make partnership working to be effective. So, it's a mandatory partnership, social coordination, government policy dominating, public-public partnership, public-private partnership. You will see some hierarchy there. You may see some, markets influence there, and you may see the what's it called, the networking, which comes with values, which is horizontal. People should treat each other very well. So if you read that article, it will give you more details. So I put it as HMN, hierarchy, market, and networking. But hierarchy is characterized by rules of governance, policy, rules, restrictive legislation that bring legitimacy into partnership working, because without rules, nothing will be done. And it's also involved power, who is bringing more money than the other. All this play a role in partnership working. There's a table in that book that you may need to see that will help you to understand the hierarchy issue. So then the author also likened different behaviors to what comes optimist, pessimist, and realist. Realists are more of hierarchy. They look at what is happening in the society and they assert that this is what we're going to do. Pessimists are more individualists, which is market, the market structure, what can we gain, Then the optimists are more of networking. Everything will be okay. We can do this. We can galvanize. We can bring people together. So, he was able to bring that characterization of each type of partnership we have. So, hierarchical based, like Care Trust, they have power and they dictate. They have the money. They have the asset. Market based, public private partnership, and the network based horizontal. The main thing in network based, which is trust, which we're going to see later on anyway. So how do we, to bring it up, Monty, so when you are bringing all your materials to, because the learning outcome said that takes so many resources to analyze and to talk about partnership working, these are the things you need to bring up and talk about. And when you are reading certain partnership working being implemented, how do they go about it? What can you say about it? What can you assert? Are they doing what they're expected to do? Is it hierarchical? Is it market? So that you can be able to say, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to apply to solve my the health issue I've identified. So let's look at the public health definition. I will give you 1 minute again to look at that, and let's see. We'll take our break at 10:55. With the way we're going, we may only be able to have 5 minutes break. So at 10:55, we'll take a break. Take 1 minute and read this and tell me where partnership working is required. 1 minute. Okay, so some of you are able to, thank you, organize efforts of society. And that's why government offered it. So UK Faculty of Public Health was able to redefine public health based on the mandatory, based on the legitimacy backed up, politically backed up by partnership in working, stem from the policy leader, politicians, that this is the way we're going to work. This is the way. If you're going to get money, if you're going to get funding, if you're going to get anything, you need to come together. And it's a way of making community to take charge to, and it's kind of involves social action. So this is organized efforts of society, and that's social action there for you. So what are we going to do now? Look at public health domains. Um, Down the road, some authors call these domains, the health issue we try to deal with, they call it wicked issues because it's so interwoven that you may need to scratch your head when you are building models so that you'll be able to touch on all bases. So look at it: health improvement, health services, health protection, health improvement. How do you bring this together? Whose expertise do you need? And all these things have to be represented in a framework or a model to be able to do that. So let's look at it: complex and weaker social issue. Should the focus on tackling obesity be on children or adults or both? See, it's getting complex. And how do you approach it? How do you apply partnership? Which model are you going to use to address this? Should it be on tackling individual behavior or on collective action, such as tackling the food and drink industry to task for manufacturing or selling cheaply unhealthy products high in sugar, salt, and fat that contribute to obesity? Now we're looking at obesity, which is health issue. And we're looking at so many things: individual, collective action. We're even looking at policy aspects of it. If you read this extract very well. And is obesity health inequality? Does it involve corporate power issue? Smoking, gang violence, deprivation. Is it based on exclusion, marginalization? Is it based on racism? Because when you see health issue, social action try to look at it from different perspectives. And that talks about system thinking. How do you look at everything from system to system? Because when you look at obesity, it may be actually grounded in racism. If you look at it, it may be actually grounded in any of these things. Drug abuse, you see teenage pregnancy so much. Is it what is driving it? Is it racism or drug abuse? Is it common or more disproportionately occurring in certain group? And then when you dig in with your model, and you'll be able to identify the problem, and you'll be able to present a very good model that will meet it with good, reasonable partnership. So public health approaches, there are many, but let's look at mode few now. We're rounding up now. Look at the model, and we'll take a break very soon. Where's partnership working here? I'll give you another minute to look at this and tell me, where is partnership working here? Sorry. Okay, some people, when somebody say all levels, there you go, there you go. Yes, somebody say all levels. Frank, partnership working is involved at all level in this model, and it's very important to be able to. How do we carry it out? So we have community-based, community-placed, community-led. Somebody mentioned in the last lecture asset-based, community-based participatory research. There's a system thinking to make you to understand this. I will encourage you to go adapt page 43 of the book I recommended. I'm going to put the page there. I think it's from page 19 to 52. That will be able to tell you more. Ecological theory has been used to understand community partnership and has been used as a historical case study of one urban high school. You can find that on your library to read it, for you to understand how partnership in the hand of public health professionals has been used effectively. So asset base, I remember one in the last lecture. I think Susie was the one delivering lecture, and one student said, what is asset base? These are the principles concerning asset and it's citizen-led. It's relationship-oriented. That is horizontal, and that means it's a networking approach. It's also asset-based. Those are the principles that where people bring and the asset is actually in-out. So community will look at, do they have statisticians? Do they have epidemiologists within them? And if they don't, then they will consult somebody outside to be able to do this. So, and these are resources, could be human resources. Do they have the money? Do they have somebody within their community to do it before they go out? So another approach to it is called in out. They look inside first for those assets before they start outsourcing or looking for resources outside. So place-based is more structural, inclusion focused. You know, it involves everybody. And that's community. So these are the things you may need to look at when you are reading. So one classical example is you may need to read, which I find very interesting too. It has construct validity, it has internal validity, it's reliable, they set it out very well, the objectives are very clear, very measurable, they use smart approach to do this, and it's a community-led partnership that involves to improve social cohesion. And the measure of social cohesion proximally. So when you are talking about community-led partnership and you want to put scientific ring onto it and you want to make it to be positivist oriented, this one will really help you if you know what you are looking out for. And that's why I started with those terms so that when you are reading, because many of them will not tell you that, oh, this is internal validity, this is construct validity. But if you know the meaning, those terms, then you'll be able to identify, oh, assert, make an assertion that this is construct validity and this is how they achieved it. This is reliable and this is how they achieve it, because they have a way they are able to establish social cohesion. There's a social exclusion with their introduction, and it has effect on population's health. And they propose this community, they call it the community spirit level, a framework for measuring that. So is somebody moving my slide? I don't know. So that's a very classical example. After our break, we will stop here. We'll take 5 minutes break. We'll come back at 11. I will round up with this. Any questions so far? Yeah, APA, thank you. APA is an acronym, you know, assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation. The recommended book name is there. You just go, once the slides are uploaded, you see it there, then you copy it. I told you it's page 19 to 52. I'll put it there for you to read. Two theories, concepts, perspective of partnership working. Okay, I'm reading those questions now. The book will be on the slide. So the name of the book, the link, you'll find it on the slide once it's uploaded. What that question is there? Okay, Chikad Odinika. Yeah, developing intervention, implementation can be a result of several parties having a common ground on how to go about it. Yes, that speaks to objectives. How practical, how do they agree on those objectives are very important. Those small things will bring so much credibility to your work, and if they cannot agree, so when we start talking about the the pitfall of partnership, it will make sense to you. Yeah, partnership working the same thing as working in partnership. All right. Okay, we'll take 5 minutes break and we'll come back at 11. All right. Okay, welcome back. We have like 20 or 25 minutes to round up. I basically took it upon myself to, to see how I can be of help in this lecture so that you can address your essay very well. If it doesn't make sense, everything will be uploaded later on, and you can simply go through it more and listen more, and it will start making sense. I started on how to critically evaluate things and be able to the tools you need. Um, there are actually jargons, but they are scientific jargons that are required to be able to critically evaluate something, and when you read too, it will also help you because no computer can help you to assert or to conclude that this paper or this approach or this concept or this idea it makes sense, or it is valid, or is it credible, and you need those tools to be able to do that, and it should reflect in your writing as well. So there's a model that's partnership working or working in partnership is implicated. Is this yeah, that is the one I'm about to do now. Olufumilayo, the Tanayi model, where partnership uh, is replicated. The social action is connected to partnership in working, and like I said, is mandatory and is grounded in the political or policy. And you will see when you see when you see model health promoting, you will see social action in there. You will see partnership working. It's not that they're going to tell you this is partnership working. They will be able to tell you. Will see when you see the model, you're possibly going to see that it involves social action, and it's applying partnership, working in partnership, and those are the things I want you to. If you look at Tanayi model, it's a critical stage of development. It involves system thinking, and you could see it brings regulations, policies. The model reinforces all these aspects in a very succinctly way. It also addresses all these issues too. Is community-led and community-based activity, and when you're talking about community-led, community-based, community citizen-led, you're basically talking about working in partnership. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's a political uh, governance way of carrying out public health promotion, if you want it in that way. You may see certain model and you should be able to identify whether this is applying. Most model that promote health involves this. Somebody mentioned social determinants of health. You could see social determinants of health, how Tanayi model has been able to do this. So you could see health education. This is Tanayi model. They try to bring in prevention, health protection, and if you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you could see how this model be able to look at regulation, policy, and bring out resources, because they call it community based. So they look for experts within the community before looking for us outsider. Community placed is when you, as a researcher, is going into a community, and some people critique it to be unethical. You are possibly, because the meaning, social science meaning, the interpretivism is that people have meaning, so it may discourage people and say, hey, he's coming in as an expert, so that's why people started changing it to community based or community led. All this terminology reflects working in partnership. So you involve the community members, you involve other people who have the expertise, and organizations, whether not for profit, and that's why I was talking about the market approach, or for profit, based on the fact that they have the expertise. And then you look at the policy, the regulation, that is hierarchical. How do you want to implement this so that it will not be problematic? So that is the book, what the book was trying to say. When you take time to read it and you see the slide, you'll be able to understand it. So the preventative services, preventive health education. Look at number 4. That is legislation, that is policy. How do you do that? How do you lobby? How do you get things done regarding seatbelt legislation? And there are many of our health promotion that is political. And how do you do that? Do you need to look into your community and find somebody who has political aspect? How do you go about it? It's one of the things. Yeah, 4 is policy. Thank you. Then 5, you see it, and it is when you're building model or trying to develop model for public health, health improvement. It's not something that is just straightforward. It involves a lot of thinking, but working in partnership is at the center of everything. BT's model and partnership working, you could see authoritative, negotiated, top down, like we've been discussing before now. And it also has the individual part and the collective part, the community development. Take time to look through this model, and you will see that it speaks very well regarding all the aspects of partnership, working in partnership or partnership working. All right. One thing I want to bring out here is the model is taught to transcend time because it uses empowering and collective forms. Susie talked about this empowerment in our last lecture. Go through the slides. How do they empower people? What do you mean empowerment? If you offer educational services through an expert, whether through not partnering with you realize in your community the lack of education or awareness or training is basically what is impairing certain health equality. Then you partner with somebody and you bring that the expertise up. Definitely, you are empowering the community or the target population. If you use community based, it's actually the design itself is empowering, because when you employ, you bring in the community member who has the expert, they have the knowledge, who have the contextual knowledge, then their input also is reciprocal, because they will gain 1 or 2 things during the dialogue, during the implementation, and they will infuse their knowledge and they will definitely gain something from it. So benefits and challenges, there are many of them in Dr. Abubakar class. Lecture that's already uploaded. I will upload mine later. Just consider yourself as a public health worker working in partnership with community members and other professionals to address a specific health issue. What do you think are some of the challenges or your partners are likely to experience? 1 minute to think about this, then I would like you to possibly cite possible answer to this. Yay, trust. Yay. Communication. Yay. Resources, cultural views, time constraint. Yeah, ethics, accountability. Okay, now, how do you measure all those? How do you prevent them? Uh, Dr. Abubakar's slides, I will signpost you to that. Please go through. But I like theory. I always look at theories that are especially empirical theories that have been used to solve all these things. Some of you mentioned communication even before the slide, trust, ego, leadership management. How do you solve all that when you're working in partnership? This small nuance, value added value to partnership working. That's VAV. That's what I mean by value added value. You need to have values. That's why the book I recommended was talking about the networking. Networking is good. Working in partnership is good. It's great. It's fabulous. You know, there are social things that we need to work as community because it's empowering. But there are so many pitfalls, and these theories have been used to solve them. Uh, like Johari window, you know, the blind spot, the Johari window. The Johari is formed from, I think, two names of Norwegians that then they form a model, and it's a four squares, and it's called blind spot. Time will not permit me to explain it, but if you go through it and you find it difficult to understand during our seminar, I can explain it to you more. But it's a very, very what's it called? Useful tool that many people working in partnership, including me, have used personally, and among people I've worked with, to be able to entrust, to establish trust and build um, uh, credible relationship. Communication, I've used transactional theory, you know, in communication. When people say something to you, are they touching your sensitive spot? You know, many things can go on when you are talking, having dialogue, communication with people. People can talk from ego point of view. How do you reply them? So transactional theory has been able to bring this down and to establish it and give you idea on how to go about it. Very useful tool in solving many issues associated with working in partnership. So look through all those, and I believe you should be able to gain a lot. So let me summarize before I throw it open for any question. I started by looking at the learning outcome. VA is value added values to, you know, I'm only trying to be thoughtful about it, the solution. You want to add value to working in partnership. Again, values, what does it mean? Effective communication, because those are values, those are moral things, how to talk to people. You mentioned it, they are values. And the positivists may not agree with it because they will say, how do you measure trust? What is trust? Okay, then we critical realists have been able to build model, concept to be able to bridge this gap between interpretivists and post-positivists. We're able to build model that answer measurable, meaningful, relevant. So Johari window is one, transactional theory is one, how to communicate, effective communication when you're talking to people, ego management, leadership management. Some of you have already had lecture on these. Those are values, added value to partnership, working in partnership. It may seem so thick, things I've discussed with you, talking about how to critique or critically, because many of your learning outcome are set or really demand from you to be able to be critical. And how do you go about it? I've laid down some foundation knowledge on how to be able to be critical. It's not just saying advantages and disadvantages of partnership working. At this level, those are for high school students. At this level, you should be able to dig deep, bring out some philosophies, bring out some perspective, use scientific paradigms like I've given to you, the validity and reliability, to be able to come at a synthesis that to justify the reason why you are using this or you are using this approach, and when or any approach you want to. So for example, in your essay, if you want to use community-led, why? You should be able to give some tangible, credible, scientific knowledge to support the reason why you are trying to use community health. And it must be logical, starting from your introduction, right to your objective, writing your objective using SMART approach. Many people don't do that. And it must resonate with your evaluation. And when you reach your conclusion, all these things must be seen. So it's a thought process. It's not something you just come up and state or anything, except you are artificial intelligence, who can quickly bring out resources. It takes time. It does. And I just have to tell you that. All right. Let me use this. PW is partnership working or working in partnership. Yeah. It's simply searching. Thank you. That's a very good question. whenever you are having a quest for knowledge, we have computer now. You don't have to go to library and reopen textbooks. But the tool you need is your search terms, search term, So you are looking at theory for or partnership working and use in tackling health inequality in London. So your search terms, your search criteria are needed. Thank you for that question, because at times people don't know how to use those search terms, especially when you are looking for articles either in library or on Google or some databases, because what you put in is what computer will generate for you. So I've given you some models. If it fits in, hopefully if it fits into any of your topic you want to write about, fine. If it's not, then you have to search. There are many models out there. But like I said, I've given you tools to be able to look at them and find out whether they are actually authentic or credible, because so many partnership in working have been embedded in certain health promotion model. How do you be able to say, okay, this is good? And I've given you one example. It's better for you to go and read it on your own, which is spirit level. They tackle social cohesion effectively. The community spirit level, and is Health.org UK. So you can easily find that available. They publish paper on it. It's a good read, but their focus is on social cohesion in the community, and they measure it. Their objectives are very, very smartly written, and they carry out a very good evaluation, and they're able to publish it. I'm talking from the point of view of public health professionals. We are not sociologists only. We are statisticians. We are sociologists, because we deal with population health. So we take knowledge from as many things as possible, that are meaningful, to be able to be very objective. You do statistics, you do sociology. This one is more like social sciences. You do policy. The navigating policy contest course is more or less like political sciences, where you learn so many ethical principles. These are the things we need, and I need to be able to bring it together into public health. So if you are looking at gang violence, or you're looking at obesity as health issue, you need to be able to tie it up to social issue. You need to be able to reframe it to make it to be social issue. Is it about inequality, social inequality, social disparity? You need to give evidence to establish that, and you need to be able to bring out a model that justify, that include partnership working, whether community-led, as a possibly plausible solution that addresses that health inequality. Yeah. Theory model framework. TMF, theory model framework, is just a very, how will I put it, a structural way to answer wicked issues in our societies, to make what is loose, what is subjective, to be objective. So when you apply theory, when you apply model, when you apply any framework, depending on what you want to use, you are making something, you're establishing the fact that I have understanding of this, and I'm making it to be, structural, and so that I'll be able to achieve what I want to do. So please, can one write on COVID as a health issue? Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, COVID, like I said, social framing, which Dr. Judy, if you're in our class in navigating health policy, has overemphasized. Social framing, anything can be constructed socially, politically, contextually. You just need to read COVID. Who are the people who are affected most in the society? Old people, or is it certain race? What does it mean? Was there an existing or pre-existing inequality in our society that made COVID to affect certain people in our society? Because health issues, when it comes, like in a pandemic or like an epidemic or endemic, it can find its own gradient, So COVID came. Who are the people affected? Why are they vulnerable? So you need to bring in that term, social vulnerability. We're all vulnerable, but certain things in our environment, our society, make some people to be more vulnerable than others. So those are the gradients, the social gradient. Parkinson and I forgot the other guy who are trying to establish the social gradient in our society. So obesity, like it's in the slide there too. Why is it affecting other people? Is it a social issue? Why is it that some eatery or outlets, or why is it that organic food are not common in certain society? So you look at all those things and you'll be able to frame it as a social problem, and you'll be able to come across with social action that may involve community-led partnership. A road traffic accident is a social issue. Is it some society, some community are exposed to more traffic accident than the other because their roads are bad, and that's how to frame it. Your voice is not loud enough. Could it be from your microphone? Oh wow, you are just bringing that up now when we're about to finish. I don't know. Let me see. My microphone is at the highest.
You're loud and clear, Ade.
I even thought maybe I'm shouting too much. Okay. All right. Any other question? I'm reading your question from this chart. Can you elaborate more on BT's model and partnership working? Yeah, BT's model is hierarchical. That's what I was trying to tell you. If you have seen the critique from the social scientists, it's more hierarchical from top down. And with that, you can simply say it's more possibly public. When I say public, I mean government. They have the legitimacy and they have the law and they may have more power. Whereby when you form partnership with them, they may be more dominating in certain way. Can diarrhea outbreak in a community be considered as a social issue, and can this be considered for the assignment? I'm not going to veto your topic, but it depends on all you've been taking from these lectures and other lectures to be able to assert. By now, you should be able to. Diarrhea, is it social gradient? Does it affect certain people more than the other? Is it poverty? And all those stuff. So when you have the knowledge and the terms, you should be able to frame anything at this level with this lecture and all the lecture you've been taking, whether it's related to it's a social issue. I can tell you that with your knowledge, you can construct anything as a social issue. You just need to establish it. Can one reference an approach that has been used in a different country other than the one is focusing its health issue? As long as it's framed in your introduction, that's why I was telling you, in your introduction, as long as you're able to establish it as a social health issue that requires social approach to it, which is social action, that also require working in partnership. And there are different types of them, community, asset-based, and all those stuff. All right. We have 1 minute more before our break. Any other? Because another person is coming in at 11:30, and I don't want to encroach on that. Yeah, Kim. Kim put up a hand. Go on, Kim. Yeah, Kim, you are one of the lecturers. You should be given access to talk. You are one of the moderators. Is that Kim?
I've just made Kim a moderator because I did not.
Yes, it was just to get moderator.
Oh,
I didn't have it, but that's
sorry.
fine. Whenever you're
No,
ready.
I have. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So suicide, suicide. It is. It could be. I've just said it. Any.
I would ask you to save your. I mean, you've spoken enough, and I think, it's unfair on you to keep explaining how every issue is a social issue. I have told my class before that if at the end of this class and your public health module, you cannot argue why, any health issue is a social issue, then really either we have failed or maybe you have not been, taking this seriously. Especially when after we've treated the social determinants of health and people understand that these are the social determinants of health. So that from transport to education to income to all the things on the Darwin and Whitehead model, if you cannot see a social gradient to these things, really, it is not at this place to, explain why suicide is could be a social issue. And in the end, like I answered somebody in the lecture, this is a master's level lectures. If Ade should go any further than this, he'll be teaching, like he's teaching lower levels. So we have a responsibility to actually, now with the understanding, go and then search for more. I would expect you to come and then argue with me that Shadrach, teenage pregnancy is a social issue because of this, or it is not because of this. Then I know that you are searching for more. But to ask Ade whether, suicide, or of course, I'm not picking on these ones, but whether suicide or diarrhea or I don't know, malaria is a social issue. I mean, he doesn't know. He's not investigated the literature. What do you think? Unless, of course, you don't understand what a social issue is. You know, yeah. Sorry, I mean, it's not what you may want to hear, but really, it's a master's
All
class.
right,
I mean,
that's fine. Thank you, Shadrach. Okay,
yeah.
yeah, just like Shadrach said, just make sure you try as much as possible. Like I said, anything can be constructed as a social problem if you apply meaningful, relevant um, um, as as a way of establishing that. All right, we'll take our break now and we'll come back um, at 11:30 for Kim to take the next lecture. Sorry, Kim, we crouch
No,
into
that's
the.
fine. Thank you very much. 11's perfect to start then.
All right, see you guys later. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I think we're all pretty much still here. My name's Kim Williams, and I work in the Learn Development Centre. I'm about to do the session with you on academic writing and referencing. Now, this session, I've been informed, is only to be 45 minutes long, because I believe you've got something else happening after that. So I've been asked just to go until about 12:15. So I'm going to be quite quick during this session, so apologies. I will make sure that you get a copy of the slides that I used during this session. So if anything is unclear, you'll be able to go back to the slides. I will pass them on to your module lead, who will hopefully put them onto GCU Learn for you. Okay, now just to give you a wee update, some of you might have met me before. I know that you're a big cohort, so some of you may have been in my other sessions. Just to let you know that if you have been in any of the sessions before, perhaps some of the sessions I did for Razak in the past, some of the stuff you'll see today will be stuff you've seen before, will be a repetition of that, and hopefully that will be useful for you. For some of you, this will be the first time you're seeing this. Okay, either way, all welcome. So what we'll do is in just a moment, I will share my screen with you, and then it will be kind of lecture style. So I'll just talk through the slides. I will just say to you at this moment, obviously I'm guessing that you can all hear me fine at the moment. When I share my screen, I will not be able to see your comments. Okay, I have a single screen here. I will not be able to read your comments while I'm presenting. So if I could ask that, unless there is a serious issue with sound or vision, if you could leave your questions until the end, because I can't answer them as I go. Okay, and we have only got 45 minutes anyway. All right, so I will try and finish up by 12:15 or just before. If you do have a question for me, if you can leave it till the end, that would be great. If if you put it in the chat just now or while I'm presenting, I will not be able to answer it. What I will do is for the first couple of slides, I will tell you when the slide is moving on, just so you can see and check that your slide is moving on as well. If for any reason you cannot see the slideshow or there's an issue with the slide moving on, again, that's when you can let me know. Okay, but we'll hope that if no one's saying anything, we'll hope that it's all going well. So just about to share my screen with you just now, so bear with me. Okay, let's share this. So the first thing that you should see on your screen, is a title slide that should read Introduction to Academic Writing and Referencing. If you can see that, you don't need to say anything. If there's any issues with that, if you could let me know. But as I say, if you can see that fine, then that's exactly what you should be seeing right now.
Kim, if there are any issues, I'll just interject and I'll let you that, people are struggling.
Oh, thank you so much. That's great. So I assume everything's okay and you can see and hear me fine.
It is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Right, so moving the slide on just now, what we're going to be looking at today, our learning objectives, is we're going to be spending a bit of time looking at the planning and structuring of academic writing. We're then going to move on to academic writing conventions, and we will finish up with our final section on referencing today. I will need to move quite quickly, as I've mentioned, so apologies if it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through these things, but I'm quite keen that we get as much covered as possible. If there are any tasks or anything that I feel we don't have time for, I will simply show you where they are, and you can look at them when you have some time, because the slides are going to come to you after this. Okay, moving slide on now, you should see a sign that says planning and structuring. So the first step when you are approaching academic writing. So usually I'm going to use for the purpose of this presentation a critical essay as an example. Okay, now obviously there'll be various types of academic writing that you'll be expected to do over time. So you might be doing literature reviews, you might be doing critical reviews, you may be doing dissertations, you might be doing reports. But for the purpose of this presentation, we are going to pretend and use as an example a critical essay. Now, I've specifically not used one of your examples or one of your essay questions because I don't want to help you too much. Not that I could, I have no background in public health. You can see the example I have used is an education-based example because that is my background. So I'm going to use this as an example to illustrate the points today. It doesn't matter at all what content is that I'm going over. The principles of the way you would plan and structure are the same. Okay, so it doesn't matter that it's not a health-based example that I'm using. The way in which I would plan for this, the way in which I manage my word count is the same and will apply for whatever it is you happen to be writing. So let's take a look. In a 3,000-word essay, critically explore the role of a teacher in improving the online learning environment for their students. Okay, so essay questions usually come in this sort of format. You will have usually a word count in there. You would usually have what we call the action verb. In this case, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. In this case, critically explore. It's the actual thing that they're asking me to do. And then you'll have some kind of content material. So in other words, in this time, it's teachers or educators, and that they're specifically asking me to look at online learning environments and how this can impact for students. So what we're going to look at today is, first of all, I would suggest the first thing that you do when approaching a question of this nature is make sure that you understand each part of it. Now that sounds like an obvious thing to say, but you'll be surprised how many people go ahead and start essays without actually properly having engaged and understood the question. So always take 5 minutes, is probably as much as this would take, just to go through and double check that you understand what is expected. Now, what I mean by that is, do you understand, first of all, what it means when they ask you to critically explore something or critically evaluate or critically analyze? Do you know what that means? Do you know why that's different to describing, for example? If the answer to that is no, not really, and that's okay if that's your answer. If you're not 100% certain what critically explore means, then the time if you do this early enough, you should have allowed yourself time to come and visit us at the Learning Development Centre, or go and do some reading around this, go and find out what it means to critically explore, because you're not going to produce a good essay if you do not understand this. Same with any content parts of this. Say, for example, obviously, one of the key focuses of this question is the online learning environment. I need to be absolutely certain what I mean, what the marker means rather by an online learning environment. Now, I saw that you guys were already doing that just as I was looking at the tail end of your last lecture, where you were asking. So I'm just going to close the door just 2 seconds. Where you were asking your lecturer, what do you mean by a social issue? Is this a social health issue? And you were clarifying, and that's okay, because obviously there are some things you need to double check. It may not be, and just as a response you got largely, is that there is an expectation that you are an independent learner, and it's not necessarily your lecturer's job to have to spell this out for you. Again, simple questions might be well received. Other questions, like today, for example, they might say, go and do some more reading around this. Make sure you understand before you start what a social health issue is or what an online learning environment is. Okay, so just make sure you understand the needs of the question first, because you can't go any further until you do that. Now, once you have got your question, and you know what you're doing, and you've spoke to all the people you need to speak to, and you've read what you needed to read at that point, you feel ready to perhaps start coming up with some kind of plan of attack for this. Now, I would advise, if you are somebody who is particularly anxious about writing, or somebody who just feels like you need to find your process, you need to find your method of getting through an essay, because you do need a process. That's a really key factor. You need a method for how to approach something like this. You can't just sit down at a computer and start writing. It's usually a disaster if you do that. So the first thing I would suggest that you do is take a blank sheet of paper, and it can be a blank Word document like here, or it could be an actual piece of paper and a pencil if you prefer. And I would write your word count at the top. Okay. Best bit of advice I can give you with academic writing is you want to get rid of that word count as quickly as possible. And I don't mean write your essay as quickly as possible. I mean start to think of ways that this number can be carved up or chunked down into manageable pieces. So even if you know nothing about your topic at the moment, even if you haven't even chosen a particular social health issue in your case, or you haven't looked at online learning environments in much detail, I know I have to write an essay, and I know at the very least all essays have introductions. They all do, just by their very nature. They have to have an introduction. And unless you are told otherwise, unless your marker specifically allocates your word count for your introduction, or tells you perhaps to write an extended or shortened introduction, we would usually say you allocate 10% of your word count to your introduction. Okay? Because you want your essay to be balanced, you also know that you need to put in, oops, I'll come back to these in a minute, a conclusion. Sorry, it's because this is covering that. Let me just go back a wee bit here. Sorry about this, I'm not working with a mouse at the moment. I'm having to work just with the keypad, which is, oh, for goodness sake. Okay, so you'll need a conclusion as well. Now, the conclusion should be, because it should be balanced, again would allocate 300 words to that as well. So forget the middle bit just now, forget that, that shouldn't have appeared just yet. But what you've got immediately, by putting your introduction and conclusion in, you've lost 600 words from that word count. So we're now only dealing with 2,400 words. So you need to then think about, what am I going to do with those 2,400 words in the middle? That's still too big to be dealing with. So what I would do at this stage is almost forget for a moment that you are writing an essay. Forget that there's an essay on the table. Forget that you've got to do that. And just imagine somebody had asked you verbally, for example, well, let's take my question. How can a teacher improve their online learning environment? What are the key ways a teacher can improve their online learning environment? What are the main ways they can do that? And I might answer with the 4 things that are on the screen there: effective questioning, interactive online tasks, group work, and visual and oral lesson elements. And I would say they are the 4 key ways in which a teacher or an educator can improve their online learning environment. Okay? Now, you might have 5 answers to yours, or 6, or 3, or 7, doesn't matter, right? Whatever you have kind of felt that you've kind of answered top level, you've answered that question with, you've kind of covered the main areas that would answer that question, I would simply take the remaining number you have, in my case 2,400, and divide that by your sections. So mine is 4 sections, so I've divided that by 4, leaving me with approximately 600 words for each section. Now, I am not suggesting for 1 second you have to absolutely stick rigidly to 600 words for each of those sections. You don't. You can beg and borrow between them, and that's okay. You can move word count if you need it. However, the reason I would get you to start and consider doing something like this before you begin, this is particularly useful for those of you who, and I was one of these people at university, I hold my hand up, I was one of these people who was a famous overwriter. And by that, I mean, I used to write too much. So I would go to the library and get all my research and come back and start writing, and perhaps start on that first section there. And before I know it, I've written 2,000 words on effective questioning. And I've got 400 to write then the rest of the entire essay, which is a huge waste of my time. It gave me a massive headache at the end, because I would have to cut loads of words out, and I'd be struggling the nights before, and it would make my life very difficult. Whereas if I'd thought in advance about how I could shorten, how I knew that I only had 600 words to spend on that section, I might be a bit more discerning about what I put in, a bit more mindful of what I needed to cut out and what I didn't, and how much research I actually needed to do. Because a lot of times with these situations, you could easily write 20,000 words on effective questioning, but you have not been allocated 20,000 words. You have been allocated, say, approximately 600. So think about how you can boil that down into its essence. Okay. So what this does immediately makes your question look friendlier. It also gives you a path that allows you to plan your time accordingly. Because you can start to think now, right, well, Monday night, I'm just going to write those 300 words and that's it. And I'll proofread it and I'll check it and I'll make sure it's okay. And then tomorrow, I'm going to go to the library and start just looking at this effective questioning section. And that's all I'm going to focus on. And I'm going to use that to inform my literature searching, because I've now got a key term I want to search. Because if you go into a library and was to type in online learning environments, I'd probably get 8 billion hits on that, and it would take me forever to go through and try and kind of boil it down into what I need. Whereas if I type in use of effective questioning in an online learning environment, I'm getting a much more tailored, focused approach. And then my note making is going to be easier. I can write that section up, and then when I've done that, I can put all those notes away and start to focus on the next section. This is probably one of the hardest parts. Once you've got this in place, then it should start to make your essay writing so much easier. It takes the pressure off you. Okay. Now, just a word of warning. The reason I put why or how can we divide these things up further, or these sections up further, is because what the last slide showed there is me dividing those into 600 word sections. I wouldn't want just a 600 word paragraph on each of those sections. 600 words in a paragraph is an awful lot, probably too much. Okay, so it's not a paragraph plan that I came up with there, it was just a sectional plan. So I would still need to think about how within those sections I'm going to divide into paragraphs, because what markers do not want to see are things like this. So imagine these are A4 sheets of paper you're looking at here. Okay, the first one, if this is an A4 sheet of paper, you'll notice that each of the paragraphs on this bit of paper are maximum 2 sentences long. So some are even 1 sentence long. Okay, that's too short. It almost looks like that somebody's taken the bullet points away here. It looks like a list. It looks like a series of bullet points. It doesn't look like considered academic paragraphs. This one, on the other hand, is kind of gone too far the other way. And it's basically an entire A4 sheet. It's just one big, long train of thought. It's not been divided up. It's just basically all just shoved together into one big, huge paragraph. Okay? You kind of need to split the difference between the two of those. Think about, have I got my point across with this? Is there a clear change of topic as to why I'm moving on to a new paragraph here? I'll show you an example. Let's take my section on effective questioning here. And you don't have to, if you're quite confident with your grammar and structure and things like that, then you don't need to do this stage. But some people aren't. Some people don't know when to take a paragraph properly. Okay, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's perfectly normal, actually. Some people just take paragraphs because they think they've been writing for too long, so they take a return because they think, oh, it's a bit long. I'll take a return there. Whereas if somebody came along and asked you why that paragraph break was there, you should instantly be able to tell them, because I've shifted topic, because I've changed exactly what I'm talking about now. Now I'm focusing on this instead. So under the effective questioning 600 words I've allocated, remember, I don't want to write 600 words in one paragraph. So I ask myself, does this divide naturally? Does this naturally want to break into sections? If so, let me think how it might. So I might say, well, what are the different types of question that exist? And I know that there are 3 different types of questioning that an educator can use. Managerial questions, rhetorical questions, and open and closed questions. They're the 3 question types. So what I can do is, rather than writing 600 words in one big paragraph on questioning, I can talk about this topic in the 3 different shorter areas. Okay, so I can just allocate roughly 200 words for each of those, and hey presto, I've done my effective questioning section, and it's nice and neat and organized. Okay, this should, again, I'm talking about this for quite a long time, but this would probably take you 10 minutes just to kind of quickly jot all these ideas down before you get started, and then you know where you're going. You're not going to get lost. And what is very obvious to a marker as well, that you have considered your structure in advance. There's nothing more obvious to a marker than somebody that has just got a load of research and sat down at the computer and just fired it all together, and it's all over the place, or it's just one big long train of thought. It should be divided into nice, clear sections. I would always say to students as well, write with these subheadings in. write with them in. You can delete them at the end before you hand in. But for yourself, I would have effective questioning 600 written at the top of that section, and then I would write it. And then I can keep checking, am I sticking to my word count? Is this all relevant to that topic? And then before I hand in, when I'm doing my proofread, I can delete the all that kind of structural work. Okay. So just make sure that when you are doing your paragraph, they should flow together, that they're in a decent order, and they should kind of lead your reader through your argument. Okay, so you start with the introduction with the general background to topic and what it is you're going to look at, and then it should lead through a logical sequence all the way to the conclusion. So just to give you an idea about what a paragraph in a critical essay should look like. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about critique today because that is a whole other topic about how to write critically. But I'm going to show you this today. And I think it's March the 21st, I believe I'm back with you. And we're going to go over what critical writing is. Okay, so don't worry, that's coming your way, but I don't have time to do all that today. But I wanted to show you the structure and balance of a paragraph in a critical essay at master's level. Okay. Now, I've taken one of my example sections here. Now, every sentence that you write in a critical essay should have a topic sentence. Okay. Now, a topic sentence, the function of a topic sentence is if I were to cover the rest of your paragraph up with my hand and just read that first sentence, it should be absolutely clear to me what that paragraph is going to be about. I should be clear from that first sentence, oh, they've moved on to talking about this now, or their focus of this paragraph is blah. Okay. Now, I've put and should make reference to the wider question. You don't have to do this for every paragraph, but every so often it's quite nice to nod back to the fact that you're talking about a bigger issue here, but right now you're focusing on this. So look at what I've done here, a really simple kind of babyish one, but it does the trick. Another key way in which the teacher can enhance the online learning environment for their students is with the inclusion of visual elements in their daily lessons. What this does, so I've nodded to the wider question, this is another way in which teachers can enhance the online learning environment, and right now I am focusing on the including visual elements. Okay, so you don't have to make reference to the wider question every time, but it is nice occasionally to nod back to that question. Now, the next thing you would want to put in is some description. And the reason I specifically mark this out is because this is where a lot of students go wrong, is they do an entire paragraph of description. And the critique, which is the bit in green and purple there at the bottom, is maybe a tiny little sentence at the end. The reason I show you this slide now rather than later is because I want to emphasize the balance of your paragraphs in a critical essay should be largely critique. Okay, description should be a small part. Now, just to differentiate very briefly, I will go this in a couple of weeks. Description is simply facts and information on a topic. So we tend to think of description as like who, what, where, when. So for example, in this case, I've mentioned that teachers can use visual elements in their daily lessons. So what I need to do here is describe or tell my reader, well, what do we mean by a visual element? What is she talking about, visual element? So let's take a look. Teachers can make use of visual elements such as single pictures, comic strips, diagrams, charts, and audio-visual clips in their teaching to enhance learning. So I've explained or described what is a visual element. Okay. Now, from here on in, I get into my critique. I get into my critical ideas, the strengths and limitations of this particular thing that I'm talking about. Now, I'm not going to go into any more detail than that this week. That's coming soon, where I go over that in some detail with you. But keep this in mind. I'll refer to this slide again in a few weeks' time. But the balance of your writing in a critical essay should be largely critical. If you tip this balance the other way, or whereas a lot of students can do this, see the blue part, your description, they would maybe have 8 sentences of description. which is not going to get them marks. It's not going to get them good marks in a critical essay because they're just wasting time telling us all this background and facts to what this is. We want to know why it works and why it doesn't work. We don't necessarily want all this information on why it is. If you have to describe or define something, keep it nice and brief. Okay, but as I say, we're going to spend more time on this in a couple of weeks' time. So a brief touch now on the conventions of academic writing. For many of you, this will be a revision. But just a reminder to you, the kind of things that your marker will be looking for in your writing. And it will be the same things that you've done at undergraduate level. The difference is they will be less lenient on you at master's level. You'll have more of an expectation that your writing meets these conventions and sounds professional. Now, the 4 key conventions to academic writing are: it should be impersonal, it should be formal, it should be clear and concise, and there should be evidence provided for what you are saying. So let's go into that in a bit of detail. By keeping it impersonal, avoid using the first person. So that's I, us, we, our. Okay, avoid using that. They don't want that in your academic work unless they specifically ask for it. So sometimes if you ever do reflective writing, that will be appropriate, but they will make that clear to you. Okay, if you're writing critical essays, dissertations, anything like that, it should be third person objective. In other words, we don't use I, us, we, our. We also avoid second person, which is you. So it's like, you often get that in recipes, you know, you should fold in the eggs here, you should mix carefully. So we don't use that either. So avoid things like this, obviously. In this essay, I will critically evaluate. Instead, this essay will critically evaluate. You could say consent is an important issue because the you in that would need to come out. So consent is an important issue because, and this is the kind of thing you might put into a conclusion. We can assume from the evidence provided, the we there is making it too personal. The evidence or research suggests that blah, blah, blah. This is the kind of thing that you may want to look out for when you're proofreading your work. Go through it, check for anything that might have crept in, because that first example is quite obvious not to do that. But these ones are a little bit more trickier. Perhaps they sound okay, they sound still academic, but because of the we and the you, it is affecting your tone. So you'd have to take that out. Now, what will also make your work sound impersonal, which we're going to spend a bit of time on towards the end of the session today, is making sure you are referencing properly and supporting your points with evidence. It is too impersonal, it's too personal rather, to sort of give something like this. The most important thing to consider when dealing with the patients with Parkinson's disease is blah, and then move on. Because you've not supported that with anything, it looks like your opinion on it, which your marker doesn't want. It doesn't want, unless they specifically asked for your opinion, which is unlikely in a critical essay, they don't want to hear it. What they want you to show is that you have read around the issue and have presented the information that you have found. So it's more likely that something like this will be the case. Neville and Simpson found that a key benefit for dealing with patients with Parkinson's disease is blah, blah, blah. Conversely, however, Jones and Smith both argue that the most important consideration is, and something else. And that's okay, because quite often there will be conflicting ideas or thoughts or theories on something, and that's fine. It's not your job to pick the best. It is simply your job to say, okay, I've read around this topic, and here is what this current scientific literature in this area is telling us about this. Okay, so just keep an eye on that. Keeping it formal in tone means things like avoiding abbreviations or contracted versions of words. So don't use things like didn't. Didn't, of course, is a contracted version of did not. Same with things like haven't, can't with the apostrophe, it's when you put in the apostrophe in, which means it is, of course. Always write in formal, full English. Now, you know this one, but just a reminder to you all, any acronyms or initialisms that you use, the first time you use them, they should be written in full, and you can use the acronym or initialism in brackets after it the first time you use it. And then after that, you can just use a shortened version because you've explained to your reader what it means. This also applies to your in-text citations as well. Okay, so the first time you use it, in full with the thing in brackets next to it, and then you can just use the shortened version after that. Keep an eye out for what we call colloquialisms or slang or kind of chatty language. Now, obvious forms of this might be specific words, like, for example, if you were talking to a colleague and you were telling them of a situation and you said something like, oh, the wee girl came in today with her mum and dad, and there are other kids in the household who were at home. Okay, so what I'd said there would make sense to you in English. It would make sense and be appropriate for you to say that to your colleague. If you were writing that in an essay, however, it would be, obviously I use this kind of Scottish we there as well, okay, for small or young. So I would have to say the young girl was accompanied by, not by her mum and dad, but perhaps her mother and father or her parents, formal, and there were other kids at home. Kids would need to become children. Okay, so not mum, dad, mother, father, kids would be children, and you get the idea. Okay, two examples we've got here. These are actually genuine examples that we took out from student essays. It's important to keep the patient in the loop. Now, that may be a phrase you're familiar with, I'm not sure. It basically means keeping the patient informed. It's a kind of colloquial or slang way of saying keeping them in the loop, keeping them informed. Keeping them informed is the correct way. It is not a literal loop you're being kept in. Helped him come out of his shell. Now, again, unless they happen to be talking about a tortoise here, in which case it would be fine because they do have shells, but human beings don't tend to have shells to come out of. It's a metaphorical shell, so we avoid that. Helped him to become more confident would be a better way of saying that. Okay, so keep an eye out for things like that. Keeping it clear and concise. Now, this is particularly important at master's level because there's an expectation sometimes that you're expected to make your writing sound fancy or educated or whatever. It's not about that. If you're using your jargon properly, if you're using your technical terminology, if you are using your subject knowledge properly and you're referencing properly, it'll sound fancy enough. Okay, you don't need to then go through your sentence and make it longer and add bigger words in. It just could end up making it sound very, very confusing. Because what can often happen is I often see students that have written paragraphs or sentences that their marker has put on it, this doesn't make sense. I don't know what you mean here. And I'll read the sentence back to them. It's like 11 lines long. And I'll ask them, what is it you're trying to say here? This really is confusing. You've written this massively long sentence. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come back and say, I was just trying to say that obesity is on the increase in Scotland in the last 10 years. And I'll just usually say, well, why didn't you just write that? That's perfectly clear. We did not need 11 lines of overly complex text in order to say that. Okay. And as I've already mentioned before, don't start writing without, you don't necessarily need a paragraph plan. You don't necessarily need a paragraph plan, but at least a sectional plan like we had earlier on. I wouldn't start writing without that. Right, last 15 minutes or so on referencing. So when should you reference? Basically, you reference in your text whenever you draw upon an idea that is not entirely your own. So that will be anytime you use somebody else's point of view or argument, anytime you use any stats, anytime you use any published evidence or policy or law or anything like that. Now, what this usually means, so students usually ask at this stage, well, does that not mean I'm referencing like everything in the entire essay? And the answer to that is, well, yes, kind of. Not necessarily every single sentence, it's every coherent thought or idea that has come from somewhere, okay? Because what a lot of students can say is they'll put something in which is perhaps considered, you know, I just knew that. I just knew that this is the correct way to take a pulse, or I just knew that this was the correct dietary requirements for this person, so I just put it in. It's like, what they would argue in academic writing is, well, yes, you know that because you've learned it from somewhere. Okay, you didn't invent that way to take a pulse. You didn't invent that dietary, that the fact that this is a good dietary requirement for them. You've got that from studies that have happened prior. Okay, so Referencing needs to be attached to anything that is not entirely your own. Things will come up in your essay where you're perhaps drawing conclusions or summarising things or putting your aim in what you're going to look at. That doesn't need referenced, but all the kind of ideas and information you're putting in should have a reference attached. Now, if you haven't been on to Cite Them Right yet, I'm sure most of you will have by now, this is your one-stop shop for how to present all of your references. I would recommend that you go on and have a look at this as soon as you can. It's packed full of resources, videos, interactive tasks that will show you how to present any reference that you need to. Okay, just make sure you are selecting Harvard when you go in there. Make sure you also access Cite Them Right through our GCU library, rather than typing into Google or anything like that. The reason being, we pay for it for you at the university. You do not need to sign up and pay for it yourself. It is paid for through your university. If you go through the library page, type in Cite Them Right, it'll let you access through there, making sure you're signed into your student account, and you can access this and have a look around. Okay, you'll need this when you are writing your reference list at the end. Okay, so let's just spend a little minute or two just looking at in-text citations. Okay, now in-text citations, as you will know, there are two places references go. They go in the text, in the main body of the text itself, in shortened version, and they go as a the reference in full will be written in a big list at the end of the document. Okay, so in-text citations, students often make this trickier than it is. There are only two ways you can do this. You can embed the citation. Okay, so first of all, embed the citation means just make it part of the sentence. And it looks like this. Surname, brackets, date it was published, and then just finish your sentence. You don't need to put initials. You don't need to put anything in italics at this stage. You don't need to add in the title. We don't need URLs. It's just simply the name of the author, surname only, and then the date after it. So Smith 2021 suggests that, and you finish your sentence. The second way is you make your point. So you paraphrase your point. Paraphrase, of course, means put it in your own words so that you're not quoting, you're not directly lifting it. It should be in your own words. So you put it in your own words, and then you can put the reference at the end because it's their idea or their notion or their findings that you're referencing, not their wording. We don't need their wording. So in this case, it's brackets, surname, comma, date, close bracket, and the full stop always goes at the end. So the reference is part of the sentence, never here. Okay, so please make sure, so my doors come open again, excuse me. There we go. So just make sure, what I would suggest is that rather than just picking one of these options and just doing one option all the way through, do a bit of both of these and mix them up a bit. It just adds a bit of flow and a bit of style to your writing. Okay, bit of both of these in the text. Now, the correct format for these, as I say, if you've got a book or a journal or anything like that with one author, really simple. It is only ever the surname and the date you will ever need to use. If you have a book or a journal or an author with a web example with two authors, then you just put and in between to separate their names. Same with three authors, it would be Anderson, comma, Smith and Wilson. Okay, so you just list their names in that case. If you have four or more authors, use et al. Now, et al comes from the Latin Italia, and it simply means and others. Okay, under the Cite Them Right system, they put et al in italics. All right, you don't need it in bold and underline like I've done it there, but it should be in italics. And they always have a full stop that follows et al as well because it's shortened. Okay, so you end up with this weird full stop comma thing there. I know it's a bit odd, but yeah, four or more authors, you can use et al. If you are using a direct quotation, it's absolutely, now a direct quotation, of course, is where you lift the wording exactly as it is and copy it straight into your essay. If you do that, it must be in speech marks and it must have a page number attached. Okay, try and avoid this if you can. markers don't like direct quotes. They are looking for you to be able to paraphrase properly, to show that you've understood what you have read. If you absolutely have to put a quote in, if there's something about wording that you want to talk about in your essay, for example, then just make sure you have the page number in place for that. All right, but don't put too many of those in if you can. Now, I have to mention, just because you may go on and see this, Cite Them Right does also state that if you are paraphrasing a specific sentence from a source, as in you've found an exact sentence you want to use in your essay and you're paraphrasing that, it does say on there that this should also have a page number. Now, I know from speaking to, for example, Razak, who I'm sure you've met before, that different markers have different views on this. My advice would be just be consistent with what you're doing. Okay, if you're only using the page number for direct quotes only, that's usually okay with your marker as long as you're just consistently doing that. Okay, the reason I have to state this is because you might go on to Cite Them Right and read that and think, oh, look at what they're telling us here. This sounds different to what Kim told us. But under our older system, we didn't ever do that. It was only ever direct quotes with page number for. Okay, so if you're unsure, just double check with your marker what they want you to do. But usually, it's fine for just direct quotes. Okay. Now I've got a wee task in here. I'm not going to bother doing this today because we simply just do not have time, but it's simply asking you, does this look correct or incorrect? And what you can do is just go through this when you've got and just check if you think it looks correct or incorrect, and then when you click, it brings the answer up. Okay, so I'll let you do that at your leisure. Same with this one. Now, if you have got this is a question that comes up a lot. What do I do if I am reading Jones's book? So Jones is the book I've got in front of me, but it's Smith's idea or table or diagram or thought that I want to use. He's been referenced in Jones's book. What do I do? Technically, what you can do is this. Smith 2014 cited in Jones 2020 would be the in-text citation. You can do that. When you are writing your reference list at the end, it is only the book or the website or the journal you have in front of you that goes in the reference list at the end. So Smith would just disappear at that point in the reference list. He wouldn't go in there. However, again, I would try and avoid this if you can. This is only invented for people who would really struggle to get their hands on the original source. So for example, I worked with psychology students a number of years ago who were writing an essay using the work of Sigmund Freud. Now, I don't know the exact date of this, but let's say Sigmund Freud's original piece came out in 1905, okay? It's perfectly acceptable for those students to say Freud 1905 cited in Jones 2020. Nobody's expecting them to go and find that original source, okay? This one would look like laziness, okay? What would happen, it would be the marker would look at this and go, right, you're trying to tell me you can't find a 2014 source and cite it originally. Okay, so keep an eye on that. Try and avoid that if you can. Okay, always try and find the original if you can get it. If you're using an internet source, so not a book, not a journal, but a website, for example, what you can do there is exactly the same as if it was a book or journal. Surname of whoever wrote it, and then the date goes in there. It's the date the website was last updated, goes in the brackets. Okay, what usually happens with websites, however, is it's not usually got a name attached to it. Sometimes it does, but usually it doesn't have a written by Bob Smith at the end of it. You just simply put the organization or the person who commissioned the website down instead, and the date is the date the material was last updated. Okay. Same with any in-text citations of diagrams, tables, images, things like that. Just a reminder, it's exactly the same. It's simply the surname of the photographer or the person who made the table or the person who made the graph and the date or year it was created. Okay, so if you're putting an image in, you wouldn't do this in essays, but in reports or dissertations, things like that, you might, in which case you simply label your image and then you reference as normal. Okay. So that's just another activity. The final thing you'll do once you have finished your essay, you've got your in-text citations in. Just a reminder, your in-text citations do count as part of your word count because you can't take them out. Your reference list at the end does not. So your in-text citations do count for your word count. Your reference list at the end does not. So basics of this, it should appear at the end of the text, the full reference list, unless you have appendices. If you have appendices, they come after that. It should contain full details of all the sources that you have used. This is where you need Cite Them Right. You go on to Cite Them Right and it will show you exactly how to lay out any kind of reference you need. You simply go on. If it's a book, you just go into the book section, look at a book with one author, two authors, and it will show you how to lay that out. You simply copy it exactly the way they do it. If they've got italics, you use italics. If they've got a comma, you use a comma. If they've got in brackets, you put it in brackets. It is not difficult. It is just quite boring. Okay, you've just got to take some time. And they should be organised in alphabetical order by author's surname. And it should all the stuff in that reference list should be all the names that appear in your main body. Okay, it's not a bibliography, it's not just anything you've ever read on the topic, it's only the stuff you've used. And it shouldn't be in sections, it shouldn't be in like websites, book, it should be one big long list organised in alphabetical order by author surname. Now, I don't have time to show you the ins and outs of Cite Them Right. However, the link is there. Take some time, look around it. It's really easy to use. Everything you need for your references is there. And if you do need any more support from us on referencing or on planning for assignments, you can book a one-to-one appointment via our GCU Learn page, or you can email us on the email address shown there. Right, coming back to you just now, bear with me. I need to just find my stop sharing screen button. There we go. Okay, right, so we're past time, unfortunately. So et al. Are 4 or more authors, you're absolutely correct. Thank you for putting that in. So if there is, I think I'm passing on to another lecturer just now. I'll just double check if there's any kind of pertinent questions in there that are I think a lot of people have answered that already, so I think most have been covered. So I'm going to pass over now. Okay, guys, if there are any questions that are specific that you need to pass over to me, please email us. Okay, has 2 options for more authors. You can use either. Just be for that. If you use et al. On your reference list, you can use either. Just be consistent. Use your preference. Okay, thank you very much indeed, guys. I will send the slides on. Thank you very much, Shadrach, for making me moderator, and I'll pass over to you just now. Thank you so much. I'll send the slides on, guys. Everything.
You can take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back in 12. Let's do 3 minutes. If you want to grab tea or stretch your legs, we'll start in 12:20. All right. Sorry, guys. I know it's been a long day and you're probably tired. But in this session, can you all hear me? Just so I know that, I'm quite audible and
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
nice. Yeah, you've been sitting for a while. I've been, we are in this together. So I'll make this quite brief. And then if you have any specific questions, we can answer them and then we move on. So, in this session is really to take you through the formative assessment. Um, and actually, for those who may be new to the semester, formative assessment as opposed to summative assessment um, is that, formative is not, it's assessed, but it doesn't contribute to your final assessment. So, it's important you participate, but it doesn't contribute to your grade at the end of this module. But really, the importance of participating in this particular formative assessment is that it is sort of related to the summative assessment, which is, what will count towards your assessment. So by participating in the formative, it gives you an insight into what the summative is going to be about, and actually gives you an opportunity to reflect and gives you some feedback on the formative, which would, go on to help the summative. So obviously, if you've got an opportunity to write something about the main essay for somebody to comment on it, you don't want to miss that opportunity because that gives you an opportunity to start thinking about the essay, the main essay, for lack of a better word, you know, um, even before we actually, before you start that. So hopefully that is encouraging enough for you to participate in the formative assessment. So the formative assessment simply asks you to write, 250 words, that in 250 words identify a health issue that you plan to use for your summative and critically, justify why that is an important public health concern. And I know in the earlier presentation where Ade was leading, some people were asking, what is a social issue? What is da, whether cholera is a social issue, da da da. And I think you have an opportunity to actually argue that out in just 250 words. So that is what, half a page, isn't it? Well, depending on the fonting and the spacing, it's just about half a page. So it says in 250 words, identify the health issue that you plan to use for your summative and then critically justify why that is an important public health concern. So really, you can already see that this may fit in the introduction of your summative essay, where, in the introduction, you argue that this essay will speak about this. This is why it's important. This is why everyone must care about this. And that is what we're really asking you to do in the formative essay. And really, it's an opportunity. So by the end of this formative essay, you should have, identified the topic you will be talking about in your summative, but also even had a think through why is that, an issue of concern, and why you're going to talk about that. Of course, we expect you to support this with references, so it also gives an opportunity for us to, review your writing and point out, some errors with referencing, if any, and also, for your colleagues to comment on it. So really, I think it's a great opportunity you don't want to miss. Of course, there's a possibility that people write something for the format, and then in the summative, they go like, based on the feedback I received, I'm thinking of changing it. Fair enough, but I would make sure that whatever you're writing for the for the formative is what you really want to write on, so that because you write a formative, get feedback on whether writing on, say, I don't know, obesity or cholera, whatever, you get feedback on it, you're like, nah, now I want to change it. Then you go and write on the different thing. It may be possible to use the feedback you received on the formative to change the topic, fair enough. But chances also are that there will be new comments which could have been made. So, I mean, of course, all I'm saying is that it's not binding that you don't have to stick to it. But ideally, you want to go for something that you're happy to repeat for the summative. So there's a very simple thing to do. It says in 250 words, identify the health issue that you plan to use for your summative, and critically justify why is that an important public health concern. So actually, to understand this better, we need to understand what the summative question is, and then I'll come back to this. But we know that even though it's just 250 words, we want you to use references. Yeah. Unlike other formative essays which we've done, which your tutors or your lecturers do mark, this would actually be peer reviewed, so your colleagues would help mark, and hopefully in the process of you actually marking your colleagues' work, identifying the possible areas of improvement, you would now be able to reflect on your own writing that if I'm telling this person to change this reference and all of that, it is hoped that you would be able to identify the errors in your own writing. But then it's also easier if your colleagues give you feedback. I think recently somebody approached me that, oh, Shadrach, I'm not happy with my marks with this assessment. Da, da, da. I was like, okay, let's go through it together. And fortunately, a colleague was around. Her colleague was around, and we were reading it together. And her colleagues were like, this is what you wrote, And I think it's easier to accept it if it comes from your colleague that no, this is unacceptable. This is not what we were taught. It's easier that way than always coming from whether Shadrach or somebody saying that this is not the right way to do it. So hopefully you also get used to the idea of giving feedback to each other, which in itself is learning for you, because when you go onto your practice, you would have to learn to take feedback from your colleagues. In fact, seek feedback from your colleagues to improve your writing. Yeah, I'd answer some of the questions when I see them, but otherwise I would answer them at the end. Formative is not group work. Yes, all individuals get to write. So we would come to class to discuss this. I think it's on the 7th March is the day we come to class to discuss. So actually come with it typed and printed, because some handwriting can be hard to read. So type it out, print it out, and when we come to class, we'll find a way to distribute it among ourselves to mark it. So it's not group work, it's individual work, but we'll deal with it together. We are not writing on the same topic. You get to choose whatever topic you are thinking of doing for your summative. That was what the instruction said. And I'm going to show that again. I'm not sure what Abayomi you mean by, is it individual or for social action? Is it individual for social action? Yeah, we're still talking of social action module. Yeah, at the end of this class, there will be examples in the for the social action assessment. For formative assessment, whether they're examples, I doubt that. It's just 250 words anyway. I wouldn't want to show examples, but I'll see if there's something available. I'll just go through and then come back to questions later. So what then is obviously we've just had a talk about referencing style. So I'm really grateful to Kim for doing that lecture. So the question actually states that in a 3,000 word essay, critically evaluate how public health practitioners can utilize social action approaches to address one identified health issue in an area of your choice. Yeah, Rizwan, you exemplars for the summative in the module site, but I thought you were asking for exemplars for the formative. Formative is not, assessed. So the question really states that in 3,000 words, critically evaluate how public health practitioners can utilize social action approaches to address one identified health issue in an area of your choice. This essay should critically evaluate how the social determinants of health can impact on the identified health problem and how the principles and practice of community development can be employed to work with the community to address the issue. So really, it is actually simply asking you that identify a health issue and tell us how you deal with it. But not just, from an individual perspective, but from a public health perspective. Why is this issue important? And that is the formative. Why is this issue important? Are there any social determinants? Are there any social gradients to this? Are there others who are suffering more than others? And why is it important? Remember, it is not simply making an emotional argument, but even looking at the economic perspective. Why should we care about this? And then you go on to tell us, how would you deal with this? How would you solve this from a community development perspective? Are there any theories that come back while you're doing this? Anyway, so it really is what we've been talking about all this while. And so this morning I was saying to you that I wouldn't really obsess over, one particular theory. It's really for you to gain awareness of the several social theories and then find, because it would be nice that when you are arguing that this is how I would approach to solve this issue based on this community thing, we'll work from a bottom-up approach. What is the evidence that this is the effective way? What is the evidence? What is the theory behind it? Really, it's a place for you to show off that you are not just making recommendations or suggestions as to how to deal with the problem of obesity in Western Scotland, or the problem of malaria in Ghana, or whatever, in wherever. It is really, it's not just your suggestions, but it's rooted in theory, it's rooted in evidence. It's actually been the suggestions have been applied here, and it's worked. So really, it is. Remember so let me show you the next slide really. So the key really is that critically evaluate. One of the very common comments you get is that your essay is descriptive, because you simply go on to tell us, oh, you do this, you do that, you do that, but you don't tell us what is the evidence that this will be effective. Could it have also been approached in a different way? Why is this the preferred choice? Is it for economic reasons? Is it for pragmatic reasons? Why this approach? Anyway, so I can see a lot of questions coming in. Where do I start from?
Shadrach, go on. I'm trying to
Thank you.
respond there. I think with Margaret,
Thank you.
right here. Yeah.
Thank you. So, in 3,000 words, remember you have the plus 10% allowance. So no more than 3,300, no more than 3,300. Yeah. How can public health practitioners utilize social action approaches to address one identified health issue in an area of your choice? This essay should critically evaluate how the social determinants of health can impact on the identified health problem, and how the principles and practice of community development can be employed in the community to address this issue. So really, it looks like do I have a highlighter here? Yeah. So it really looks like that the formative is looking at the first aspect, that how this issue can impact. Yes, it looks like the formative is looking at this first section of it, which essentially, is going to be your introduction sort of for the summative. I hope that has been helpful, but if not, I'll just continue. So the formative assessment will be peer assessed, as I've already explained. It will take place during, on campus on 7th March. And then for distant learning students, there's an asynchronous, session and a discussion board, which will be available on the week beginning 6th of March. So it'll be a bit slightly different, but yeah, the ideas are the same. So you are to select a health issue of your choice in a geographical area of your choice, and actually use the formative section or use the introduction to argue why is that an issue in that area. And you want to make that clear. Are there any specific social gradients? Are there some people who are suffering more than others? You see, and why is it a social issue? Why is it a public health issue? And the discussions would be evaluated around 4 main criteria, um, which are logical development, critical analysis and evaluation, knowledge and understanding, and an application of theory. Logical development is 10%, the rest are all 30% each, making 100% in all. Logical development, in fact, if you go to the GCU Learn site, it is explained what the expectations for each of these are. What is logical development? You read some message and you're like, oh dear, what is this essay about? We want to see the argument, develop from one point to another. And so I'm really happy that, Kim talked about topic sentences, how you structure your argument. And one of the strengths about writing an essay is that you've got, when do you have to submit this main work? I think somewhere in May, isn't it? I need to double check that. The summit, this is ready for March, but I think the summative is to be ready by, let me just confirm that. Does anybody know? You can let me know. Yeah, it's 2nd May actually. So the summative, you have up till May to do the real deal. So that allows you to start putting your thoughts together, restructuring, making sure that the argument is clear. I've read some very impressive works, and others you can see clearly that this is a rushed work. If you leave it till the end, it will become evident. All right. So logical development looks at how the essay unfolds, how you argue from one point to another, one paragraph to another. Is there some sequence to it? There's even a natural sequence to this, which has been in the assessment, that why is this a public health issue? Why is it a social issue? And what will you do about it? So you clearly want to begin by arguing why it's an issue, what is the cause, who are affected, before coming to the solutions. Are there any theories behind your suggestions? Any evidence that has worked elsewhere? Why are you not considering other approaches? What are the limitations regarding the solutions you are suggesting? What are the weaknesses? What are the things to be aware of? And even what is the evidence that what you are suggesting will be applicable in the context? For example, if you are citing that bring taxation as a way of reducing obesity, because it's been applied in Denmark when there was a sugar tax. It reduced the basal BMI in the community by 0.2%. What is the evidence that it will work in Nigeria? You want to tell us that in a similar context in Ghana? So I want to see that you are thinking about what you write. And anyway, I can only be share this to an level, but you clearly see where this is going. And if there are any questions, we'll deal with that at the end. So knowledge so that comes to the critical analysis and evaluation. Knowledge and understanding speaks about whether you can show understanding of what you're talking about. Do you understand social determinants of health? Do you understand the social approaches? Do you understand the theories behind what you're talking about? Do you understand community development? Do you understand how partnerships with communities do work? So demonstrate that you understand what you're talking about, and that will be clear in what you write. And an application of theory, obviously, is how you show that these things have worked elsewhere and it's rooted in the evidence. Um, so, uh, sorry guys for the slide. There's a way that um, Collaborate would always mess up your slides. So it will be a workshop. It will be a workshop where we'll discuss the formative among ourselves, and following the discussions and feedback from your assessment, you can explore how this relates to your summative assessment, what we expect to see in the summative assessment, and what your formative, using your formative to start. That will be the foundation, because that's really the introduction to your summative. There's the temptation that you just simply unedit your formative and paste in the summative, which will be wrong, which could be inappropriate. You want to use the feedback that you receive from your colleagues, even your tutor, to improve your introduction and argue it clearly. If after writing you realize that there are some changes, you effect them accordingly. It's not cast in stone. Yeah, so after the class, there will be some examples that can help you, they are examples, they are not model answers. And I cannot that enough. I've got a few emails, people telling me that, oh, I used the example, I followed it dito, and yet I didn't score well. It's an exemplar. It was a student like you who sat in a class as this, who produced that. It is with the hope that it gives you an idea, the variation in writing, in topics, but don't think it's blueprint that, this is what you are supposed to copy your work. That's not the idea. All right. So what you need to do, so you should come to the class with your 250 words formative assessment on 7th March, without which you cannot really participate in a class. Refer to this relevant section in the GCU Learn, and then you will find the question, referencing guidelines, and the marking rubric for what we're looking for. Remember, it's a rubric so that if you score 40 over 100, in the summative, it's not that you've missed the pass mark by 10 points. No, it's really a burden. It's really for explanation, rather than, being nominal value of it. It's not the nominal value, it's the interpretation that matters. So even if you scored 49, it doesn't mean that you missed, the pass mark by a mark. It's the interpretation that you were close to passing by, a few points. Anyway, you've been in this class for long. I'll not belabor this any further. Let me know if you have any questions and then we can answer. Thanks very much, Ade and Michelle and Margaret and Susie, actually, for staying with us throughout the session. Yeah, so we can answer some questions if you have any. I know you can't speak, so if you post in the... Yeah, but just please complete the 50. What does it mean? Lillian, what do you mean? Formative is printed or PowerPoint? No, it's printed. I mean, we all can do PowerPoint presentations. So Rizwan is you print it on a Word document. We distribute among ourselves. We treat it, discuss it. One should suffice. One is fine. One copy, yeah. We do not need to turn it in here. No. A rundown again of what is required in the writing? What do you mean? I mean, I was just explaining what we mean by critical analysis, critical evaluation, and all of that. Um, don't fret. Write what you can for the formative. In your sessions, you and your tutor would. It's easier if there's some writing to do with, how you are writing, and it's just about, thinking about what you're writing, because there are times somebody will write a very strong argument, you see, but there's an obvious. So I the example whereby you've said that, let's tax sugar, it will be effective, but your example, your reference is based on a Danish example. What is the evidence that this will be applicable in Nigeria? Is there also evidence that this has worked before? Perhaps not in Nigeria, but you can show evidence from Cote d'Ivoire or a similar country and argue that there's reason to believe that this would also work in Nigeria, because in Cameroon or in Ivory Coast, when it was introduced, it worked, and this is how they did it. So in the Nigerian context, this should be we want to see that this is a master's level writing. And that is one thing that we don't emphasize enough, and students sometimes forget, that we are expecting a master's level writing. It's not just putting things together. It is a level 11 writing that we're expecting. Yeah, so that is to really demonstrate that criticality, and that is it. Um, Olayinka, I mean, I'm not sure about seeing a pattern before the 7th, but I can find out if there's anything to show. But I really don't like the word to see a pattern, because what I don't want to read is a similar pattern throughout. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate your writing. What do you want to write about? Obesity? What is, maybe not what's obesity, but why is it an issue? Why is obesity an issue? Why is it an issue in your area? Why should we care about? Why do you want to talk about that, among other topics? And that is what it really starts from, the criticality. Why are you writing about obesity compared to others? And I think for me, one of the things that helps me in my writing is that I think about this. If I was to be in a lift, or the elevator, as the Americans would call it, and I met an investor, let's say you met Bill Gates, or say Elon Musk or whoever, in the elevator, and you want to pitch a public health idea to them, that Bill Gates, this is where you have to invest in to do something to improve population health in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Glasgow. What would you tell him? You have 250 words. What would you tell him to invest $1 million, £1 million in the? So it's really about arguing with yourself. Why not this? So imagine that Bill Gates asks you, why not vaccination? Why not COVID? Why obesity? Why this? So you want to support it with statistics, with numbers, that these are the number of people who are affected. This is the consequence if we do nothing. It's a pitch to an extent. I mean, I've read some really interesting works, and some of them are out. There are some you want to invite a student out. What are you talking about? Sorry, but can you repeat how much similarity index is okay? There is no single answer to that, Rizwan. Um, because if your similarity score is just 5%, but you've lifted a paragraph from somebody's work without acknowledging, of course that's going to be an issue. But if you've cited and there are similarities throughout, then um, I mean, I mean, consequence for international students. Fair point. But can you think of the greater consequence if you are given a Master of Public Health degree when you don't meet the standard and you are made, where are you from? Ogunlola. So I'm presuming Nigeria. And you are made the director of public health in Nigeria. And I have to say that, yes, I gave her a master's degree, so give her the job and you mess things up. That's even going to be worse. Um, yeah, no, I know what you mean, but there's opportunity for you. So start early. I struggle with my writing, you see. So what I do is I start early enough, write the first draft, go over it, refine it, read more, refine it. So by the time I'm submitting the work, I've had opportunity to actually read through my work, make sure that the arguments are airtight and it's really good, you see. But when students leave it till the end and you firefight it through, it will be evident because references are all over the place. And one of the things I would easily check, I just pick one of your references, go to the reference list. Is it there? If it's not there, I'm already flagging you up for incomplete referencing. If you cite something that looks like, I've never read this before, I just check Google the reference you've given. And once I see that, no, that's a lie because you've cited something that isn't what it is, then, that's where suspicions begin. And before you realize, you're already hitting below 50. But where, it's clear that you've done good reading, you've cited from good sources, ideally journal articles, recent papers, no longer than 5 years, you're citing something relevant, you are telling me that, oh, a randomized control trial in here found that this strategy works better. I know that this person is actually thinking about the level of evidence. So really, while you need this class to pass, it is not just about this class. You need to bring in what you've learned in other classes, even the level of evidence, you see, and show your knowledge in other areas. Anyway, I'll keep quiet for the next few minutes and read your questions. And Ade and others, if you want to make interventions, please feel free to.
Well, you're good. Thank you.
Oh, Chuku Emeka, that's a really good question. The health issues to evaluate, are they limited to physical disease or one? Absolutely, you could see. If you were here in the first class when Ade was speaking, people were asking, oh, what about obesity? What about cholera? And I was getting furious that at the end of this class, I can argue why mobile phone addiction is a social issue. It's, of course, it's not just making up things, but as a public health person, you are always thinking of the social element. Maybe because there's an area of research of interest to me also, but you are thinking of the social element for mobile phone addiction. It's affecting everybody. But who, if I have just £5,000 to deal with mobile phone addiction, where would I have to invest that issue? So going back to the Bill Gates issue, Bill Gates is interested in vaccination, interested in obesity, interested in social enterprise. You want to argue with, make a case that invest your money over here. What would you tell the person? So no, it's not just about physical conditions, a condition that you are passionate about. If you can argue that it's a health issue and it is of public health relevance, then you are in a good, you are in a good place. So yeah. Oh, please raise one. I didn't want to see this question. How many references should we add in? I mean, I don't know. Just enough that is required. I mean, as a rule of thumb, 250 words, I don't know, 10 references? I really don't know. There's really no answer to that. Just make sure you reference where it's necessary. And yeah, there are really no. I don't know if Ade has an answer to that, but I don't know how many references are needed. Mm,
I mean, rule
yeah.
of thumb, if it is a proposal, the rule of thumb in many colleges or universities to have not less than 20. I mean, it's not necessary. You can't write 3,000 words and you use 5 references.
No.
And it's not expected for you to write 250 words and you just give us 40 references. I mean,
Exactly. You see,
so
just a balance.
yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say something, and I know Kim talked about writing. Sometimes when people write that research shows that da 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 da, and there's no reference, and I'm wondering where is the research you are saying that showed something. So there are some leading phrases that must be supported by reference. When you say the literature shows that da 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 da, where is the literature? If I can't find it, then I'm wondering where is that. You see, or when you say an overwhelming, evidence shows that, and you cite just one paper, I'm like, well, you could have cited maybe 2 or 3 in support of that, since you say it's overwhelming. So yeah, yeah, Lillian, the other lecturers are more sympathetic, really. I mean, they would agree if you can argue that mobile phone addiction is a public health issue. It depends on how you argue it out. Who is it affecting? What aspect of health is it affecting? Why, what is the consequence if we don't do anything about it? How is it impacting development? Why should we do something about it? And if you make a clear case, the person will see what you're talking about. Of course, supported with evidence,
I
you
mean,
know.
start with the fact, what is addiction? How is
Mm,
it defined? That's what I was saying in the theoretical aspect. How do social scientists define addiction? Some may argue about it that it's because medical perspective, So start with use reductionism. Start from the little. What is addiction itself? Read about it. That's what Kim was saying. Be well grounded in the knowledge, go through the literature. All these things I'm telling you, I may say this, I don't want to mislead you. I've read about addiction, I know about it, but search the literature. Read. You want to write about addiction? Read about it and see what other scientists who have done, who have offered, profile, presented empirical theories. Then you'll be well grounded. Then you'll be well knowledgeable about it. Whatever you want to write, like Kim said, be grounded in that knowledge. So in that way you can approach it very well. You can ask as many questions about this, but until you start searching the literature, you will not be able to demonstrate that knowledge. Okay. But to answer your question, addiction can be socially framed. And like Shadrach said, how did the person, who are the people, remember inequality again, who are the people affected most? Is it related to something in their environment, like maybe low socioeconomic factors? There's so many wealth. That's why that book called it wicked social issues. That are so deeply rooted into so many of the social determinants of health until you, public health professionals, can go in critically, analyze it. Nobody can do anything. And that's when you go in deeply, you'll be able to bring out the best solution, meaningful, tailored to this specific group. Contextualize things, the people. When you look at problem, look at the people, the location, the context, the area, the time, especially the target population. It will really help you to understand the social determinants of health. But if you bring it to very big issue, without contextualizing it, maybe narrowing it down to specific location, to specific people, uh, you may run into trouble. All right.
thank you, Ade. Nanji, the 250 words is simply asking you to, let me show you. The 250 words is not asking you to discuss all of this. It's simply telling you to identify a health issue you plan to use for your summative and critically justify why is that an important public health concern. So that is the only part you are doing in the 250 words. You are not to suggest solutions or anything. No, you are just telling us why, what have you selected in what area and why is it important. So that's all you're doing. Thank you very much, Naz, for your kind comments. Yeah.
Oh,
Margaret, go, please.
I'm probably just emphasizing what people are saying. But first of all, we're not sort of trying to give you a hard time. We're trying to help you. So we're not like, if we find one mistake in a reference, you're not going to fail. You're not even going to get a low mark for that section if all the other references are right. So it's kind of an overview. But if someone consistently doesn't reference properly or uses like someone was saying how old can references be. Now that depends. If there's a lot more evidence came out since, if you reference something in 2007 and nothing else has been said since then, that's fine, but you should state that. But if there's been a lot more movement in the area since then and you don't mention it, it feels like you haven't really engaged with the question. That's when I get a bit annoyed when someone says things like, a recent study showed blah, 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 2005. And I think, well, that's not in any way recent. So, but if you've got like, as people said, Freud, or if someone's like a seminal person and they've come up with like realist evaluation or something like that, then you can say that. Um, I wanted to say, oh, Lillian had asked about whether one person might think it's an addiction and another wouldn't, as far as the tutors are concerned, the lecturers. And we do speak to each other. So and we want to give you good marks. So if I were to read an essay and think that's not really public health, I would then go back to another tutor or lecturer or the person who designed the course and say, would you consider this public health? Has that been checked with you? And also, for the formative assessment, that's your chance to get feedback. That's your chance to, it's not marked. So that's your chance to understand the area before you go on and write a whole essay on it. So use that as an opportunity. I hope that's all helpful. I'm just, I'm probably just repeating what other people have said, but I sort of get the impression that you're thinking that we're trying to do you down. We really aren't. We're trying to make you have good marks.
No, thank you very much, Margaret. And I like how you ended that. We really want you to do well because for one, I don't want to mark the resets, you see. And it's, I wish you know what struggle it is, to fail an essay, because you are like, oh, I wish you would do it a bit better, that I wish it's a pass. But because our own marking is being moderated, you see, if I mark a bad script and I pass it for the sake of it, and a colleague, or an external examiner should moderate that, I would have somebody to answer to. Now, somebody will ask me, Shadrach, let me see where you got your master's from, or even your PhD from. Are you sure this was a pass? You see, so there are checks, and we really try, to pass it. Because I mean, what's the difference between 45 or 49 and a 50? If it's a pass, I'll pass you. I know. Um, and it's often the first call we make. Is this a pass? Yes or no? If it is a pass, what banding does it deserve? Is it a 70s? Is it a 60s? Or it's a 50s? If it's a fail, then what is the banding? So these are the levels of thinking we have to go through also. So anyway, thank you very much, Peace. Yeah, the 250 words is more like the introduction. Absolutely, absolutely, Michelle. It could be a mental health, population level interventions like vaccinations. Um, you could talk about, I've read, what is that thing called? When people were recently refusing the COVID vaccination, if you want to talk about that, good for you. But remember to go for something where you can have research to support it, you know, so that it's not all anecdotal and, you can have research to support it. Um, Somebody's actually spoken about, I've read an essay on pollution in hospitals. So I thought that was quite an interesting topic, and they did quite a good job. It was quite a struggle, but they did quite a good job. And they were clear in their mind that I'm talking of pollution, not pollution based on air. No, I'm talking of pollutants from hospitals into the community and how hospital. And he argued as to the amount of waste hospitals produce per year and where that is being disposed and the lack of knowledge. It was fantastic, you see. So And they made a strong argument that this is, a public health issue, and there's a social gradient to it because we dispose this rubbish in these communities, and they end up. So yeah. Anyway, you see where this is going. Yeah, I mean, so somebody's asking about, well, diabetes. Yeah, if you think diabetes but please choose an area because you're gonna really struggle to make a good case if you just talk about diabetes in the world. Talk about diabetes in a community, and community here is not necessarily, Glasgow or something. It could be among, children with a particular. It could be a particular. What community do you want to talk about? So anyway, I've done my 30 minutes. It's 1 o'clock. So thank you very much. If I'll stay on for the next 5 minutes and allow if people have questions. Otherwise, um, see you in a few weeks. Thank you.
Do you? Jesus. Has everyone gone? Shadrach, you're still here. Waiting.
I'm
Susie.
here. I'm here.
Yeah, I'm around.
Hiya.
I'm here. It shows we still have 250 attendees, so it's
All
not
right.
just
Okay.
the moderators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we have
Oh
a
yeah, I see that
Teams
there.
chat quickly?
Yeah, I think that'd be a
Can
good
someone
idea.
say I can't set up a Teams chat?
Neither can I,
Yeah,
but
that'd be
some
really
sense.
helpful.
Oh yeah, Amber, Joy, it was question wasn't answered. That's true. Can you go back to that? Joy, do you want to speak just now? Can Joy speak? That's it. So are we to underpin our arguments with all the social theories and models taught? Oh, sorry. I think there's an echo. Oh.
I mean, I
So,
think there's no way you can use
no.
all the social theories. You use what is applicable. And so the essence of these classes are to expose you to some of them. And so you have to use the theories that are useful to support, whether the intervention or even if it's a theory that can explain why it's an issue and who is being affected. Um, because this was done previously and we were told not just to add all of the outcomes, but only to argue with. Yeah. Does that help? I don't know if I've answered that well.
Yeah, I think you can't put every single theory into one area. So it's up to you to justify why the theories you've chosen or what would be most effective to help the area that you're looking at and what theories would help that. Because you've only got so many words, and if you were to go through every single theory, explaining why each of them were and weren't involved, you wouldn't have many words
Absolutely.
left.
And some will not be relevant to what you're talking about anyway. So
Mm. And that sometimes is where the balance is slightly wrong, is people spend an awful lot of time on describing all the different theories and not enough time sort of critically thinking about their own area of interest. in my opinion. Yes, there are a lot of models. And theories change and people argue with each other, and you can't justify all of them. You know, people bring out new theories all the time, which is good. But you can't, you know, can't apply all of them to one thing.
Are
Like you
people
can
just
try that.
asleep or something? We've still got about over 200 students online.